Hi, today I'm going to talk about why it is that winter attention feels harder. This is all about circadian rhythm, amplitude, and the hidden timing problem in learning. Natural light affects our internal timekeeping system. This includes the daily circadian rhythms of our physiological and psychological systems, which affect even our mood and our behavior. Our response to light regulates these systems through entrainment, displaying the role of rhythm as a regulating mechanism. In the winter, the changes to our circadian rhythm are a byproduct of changes in natural light and also our reliance on artificial light. We might interpret this as low motivation in the classroom, but first, let's consider biological timing. Winter attention is actually not a motivation problem. Each winter there's a challenge to learning. Although effort increases, it is not necessarily matched by progress. There's a brittleness in the children's attention. They're more easily distracted and they need more encouragement to settle. The inconsistencies in their focus are often explained by motivation or a lack of resilience or problems at home, but they could also be better understood by thinking in a systemic way about the broader biological patterns of winter. What matters here is not effort, but timing. When biological rhythms are misaligned, attention becomes more fragile, even in motivated pupils. And this is why January can feel disproportionately demanding. Let's think about attention networks. Attention is usually described as the fuel or the energy that drives our thinking and our ability to sustain focus on a specific task. A searchlight is a popular metaphor for attentional focus, which portrays the mind directing its energy resources onto the point of focus. The dorsal attention network, also known as DAN, with nodes in the frontal eye fields and the intraparietal sulcus, corresponds with the notion of attention as a searchlight that can be directed at will. And yet, there is another form of attention. The searchlight of the DAN involves the projection of cognitive resources onto something in the external environment, perhaps a shiny object, a particular person, or the solution to a problem. By contrast, introspective attention looks inward. Attention is captured by distractions that arise from within the nervous system. For example, a racing heart, hunger pangs, anxiety, or even a déjà vu. These internal bottom-up stimuli are mediated by the ventral attention network, also known as VAN. These bottom-up stimuli of the VAN are irrelevant to the goal-oriented focus of the DAN. So in order to stay on task, children must develop inhibitory control of these distractions and the ability to switch their attention back onto the task in hand. So if January feels harder than it should, you are not imagining it. Let's think about why the January classroom feels more effortful. For school leaders, this distinction actually does matter. It explains why some pupils cannot bring their attention back without first stabilizing internal states. In winter, pupils' attention is often pulled inward by hunger, fatigue, anxiety, and low mood. The classroom might feel restless or flat, but the pull away from learning comes from the bottom-up attention system, the VAN, and children must more frequently bring their focus back on task using cognitive switching and the dorsal attention system, the DAN, to do so. And this can help to explain why January can feel so effortful even when the quality of your teaching is extremely high. Let's think now about attention networks, executive functions, and timing. Executive functions help us to stay focused on tasks, to plan and to organise goal-directed behaviour, as well as to manage multiple tasks effectively. There are three core executive functions, and these are working memory, which allows us to hold information in mind and also to process the information, for example, by performing a mental calculation. Secondly, we have cognitive flexibility, also known as task switching, which supports decision-making processes that help us to keep the task on track by pivoting, for example, when the external or internal conditions change. And thirdly, we have inhibitory control. This enables us to sustain our attention on the task rather than to become distracted. Traditionally, the prefrontal cortex of the brain has been associated with these processes, but recent research suggests that multiple processes contribute to executive functions and that more than one brain network is involved. Executive functions are influenced by internal and external stimuli, for example, optimal conditions of lighting and sound outside the person, and an absence of pain and hunger and thirst from within. This blend of internal and external factors is not only about the physical conditions, there are also factors that relate to the past, the present, and the future. Executive functions draw together our previous experiences and also infer what might happen next based on reasoning and probability, as well as on autobiographical memories that might evoke how it felt to be in certain situations. Being able to time travel in an instant and to make decisions or solve a problem by drawing on a wide range of experiences is now thought to involve 5 of the 6 main brain networks: the salience network, the default mode network, the central executive network, the ventral attention network, and the dorsal attention network. Let's think about reading fluency as a time-dependent process. This networked view illustrates why reading is not a linear process, but timing dependent. Reading orchestrates processes involving prediction, memory, attention, and emotional regulation. This more dynamic perspective achieves a more flexible and integrated view of executive functions across a broad range of networks and dispersed across different regions of the brain. Each of these play an important role in learning and reading comprehension in particular. This networked view of executive function offers a more nuanced, rhythm-based lens on reading that considers multiple networks as well as the effects of cognitive load. As we can see from the involvement of the 2 attention networks, the executive functions are involved in maintaining and allocating attention. And if you'd like to know more, please sign up for my weekly newsletter, Insights. So we're going to think now about how circadian rhythm regulates alertness, focus, and energy. In education, we rarely talk about amplitude, yet it may be one of the most important variables that we're currently overlooking. Amplitude determines not just how alert pupils feel, but how well they can anticipate, integrate, and express what they are learning. When amplitude is high, alertness sharpens, anticipation improves, and learning feels easier. When amplitude is flattened, as it often is in winter, clarity and prediction weaken, even when effort and motivation remain high. There is evidence that shorter days and lower light intensity have an effect on lowering mood. Our mood is regulated by neurotransmitters such as serotonin, dopamine, and noradrenaline, as well as our state of alertness, motivation, and attention. Our alertness is governed by our circadian rhythm, which is a wave pattern that rises and falls with the journey of the sun across the sky. In winter, the amplitude of this wave is relatively flat and lacks definition as the sun stays low in relation to the horizon. And in the summer, the sun remains high above the horizon, and the amplitude of our well-defined circadian rhythm reflects this, with increased alertness for much of the day. Amplitude shapes clarity, expectancy, and integration. When amplitude is high, the brain anticipates accurately, and when amplitude flattens, information processing becomes weaker, prediction is clouded, and learning feels fragmented, even when motivation is strong. Some people with a flattened circadian rhythm experience seasonal affective disorder, also known as SAD, and benefit from light therapy, which boosts mood and improves their sleep. Various genes govern our circadian rhythm across many species and have been investigated in mice and fruit flies, and these have been bred so that the effects of removing particular genes can be studied. The genes associated with our circadian rhythm are also closely tied to our mood. So the mice who are lacking the genes that govern circadian rhythm exhibited sensitivity to stress, despair, anxiety, and an increased need for sugar. They were also helpless and more likely to be depressed. Researchers have now established a link between the cryptochrome genes and the availability of dopamine receptors in the reward system. Now, interestingly, a study of old order Amish, a population that does not experience seasonal affective disorder, showed that a pre-industrial lifestyle may explain the importance of our natural circadian rhythm. This population had a 10-fold higher amplitude in diurnal variation than the general population. As they were outdoors all year round, their circadian rhythm was not altered so much by seasonality or by increased use of artificial light in the darker months. Taken together, the research points to the link between mood and sensitivity to the dark light cycles in nature. Our society values consistent productivity, but our genes are programmed to entrain with the light, and when we optimize the amplitude of our circadian rhythm, as in the example of the old order Amish, mental health disorders just associated with seasonality completely disappear. Imagine for a moment that you're at a theme park riding a roller coaster. The steeper the gradient, the stronger the response in terms of thrill, energy, reward, and pleasure. Now imagine a road bump. It just doesn't register physiologically, not in the same way at all. So the key is expectancy. Amplitude sharpens expectancy. Let's think about prediction, expectancy, and why it is that effort alone is not enough. You see, fluency feels effortless when the conditions are right. Prediction is not a higher order skill layered on top of decoding in reading. It's the mechanism that powers language processing. We are programmed to anticipate what is coming up next. This applies to social interaction, the plot twists in a movie, learning to walk as an infant. We thrive when the amplitude is steeper, not only in terms of responding to cycles of dark and light, but also in the way that we learn, and that includes learning to read. When we increase the amplitude in relation to reading, we make it easier to anticipate what is coming up next in the children's reading, and they are better able to assimilate the content. Expectancy supports prediction, and prediction underpins fluency and comprehension. Reading fluency depends on prediction. The ability to anticipate what comes up next in a phrase, a sentence, or a line of text is what allows decoding to give way to comprehension. Circadian and rhythmic amplitude support this predictive capacity. When amplitude is reduced, anticipation weakens. Children may still decode accurately, but reading remains effortful and fragmented. So, what changes first when timing is restored? So what I find is that what emerges first is not faster reading, but stability in reading. As sensitivity to rhythm increases, pupils report that they feel happier and calmer, and that they're able to listen to their teacher, that they've become less internally distracted, and that they're more focused. The children that I work with in Rhythm for Reading are chosen for the project by their class teachers based on progress in reading in the previous academic year, and the gains in reading comprehension take place within a single academic term. When timing is supported, the changes that follow are not trivial. I mean, for example, what we observed last term was not a sudden acquisition of a skill, but a restoration of stability. This appears first in attention, then in anticipation, and eventually in reading outcomes. One child said, "I'm not silly anymore," and he made an 18-month gain in reading comprehension. Another one said, "I feel nice and calm," and she had a 17-month gain in comprehension. Another said, "It was good, it was calming." For her, there was a 13-month gain in comprehension. Another one said, "I felt focused," and she experienced a 12-month gain in comprehension. Another said, "I can listen for longer," And for him, we saw an 11-month gain in comprehension. Similarly, another one said, I listened to the teacher more. And here we saw a 15-month gain in phonological blending. And this is why rhythm matters for attention and learning, and this is what it can mean for school leaders. For leaders, we are now reframing the challenge. The new question is now how effort might become more productive by leveraging rhythm. You see, rhythm is enrichment for most pupils, but for some, it's an embodied cognitive scaffold for learning. When timing is supported, effort for these children becomes productive. This perspective removes the sense of blame without lowering standards. When effort does not translate into progress, the question is not necessarily about motivation, but about regulation. When rhythm becomes a tool for regulation, the timing of biological rhythms can support learning. Systems that ignore this natural phenomenon demand increased effort for diminishing returns. Once children's sensitivity to rhythm has been restored, they're better able to control their impulses. Feelings of calmness suggest that previously they were experiencing maybe some anxiety about reading, or perhaps they were just simply not at ease. And this underscores the importance of mood for focused attention and access to executive function. Rhythm provides a natural biological means to rebalance the attention system. Thank you so much for listening. In compiling this work, I've drawn on cognitive neuroscience, classroom observation, and outcomes from structured rhythm-based intervention in primary, secondary, and special schools. If you'd like to learn more, please follow me and visit the website. Thank you. Bye.